America's job market didn't collapse in a crash. It changed quietly. Jobs still exist. Companies are still hiring. The economy still looks stable on paper. But for millions of people, work no longer feels secure, predictable, or worth trusting. Layoffs happen without warning. Careers stall without explanation. And effort no longer guarantees stability. The most dangerous part isn't that jobs are disappearing. It's that insecurity is becoming normal. The American job market did not break in a dramatic way. There were no mass shutdowns, no lines stretching around city blocks, no single moment when everything fell apart. Instead, the job market shifted quietly. And that quiet shift is what makes it so dangerous. On the surface, things still look fine. Unemployment numbers remain relatively low. Job listings are everywhere. Companies continue to post openings, announce growth plans, and talk about long-term confidence. From a distance, the system appears functional. But for millions of workers living inside it, the experience feels very different. Jobs exist, but stability does not. Work is available, but security is not. Employment continues, but trust is gone. This is the defining contradiction of today's job market. For decades, the health of the job market was measured by simple indicators: unemployment, hiring, and wages. When those numbers looked strong, people assumed workers were doing well. That connection no longer holds. Many of the jobs being created today are temporary, contract-based, or part-time. Benefits are thinner. Hours are unpredictable. Roles are structured to be replaceable rather than durable. A job can exist without offering a future. That distinction matters. Someone can be technically employed and still feel one mistake away from crisis, one illness, one missed paycheck, one sudden restructuring. This is not a labor shortage problem. It is a job quality problem, and job quality rarely shows up in official statistics. One of the most defining features of the modern job market is how uncertainty has been normalized. Layoffs no longer arrive with warning signs. Profitable companies cut staff preemptively. Teams disappear overnight. Careers end without explanation. At the same time, hiring has become deceptive. Companies post jobs they don't intend to fill. Others interview continuously without making offers. Roles stay open for months, creating the illusion of opportunity while delivering nothing. This creates a strange psychological environment where workers feel constantly evaluated, but rarely chosen. People apply, interview, wait, and repeat. The effort is real. The progress often isn't. This is why so many workers feel exhausted even when they're doing everything right. Work used to act as a buffer against uncertainty. A steady job meant health insurance, predictable income, a sense that tomorrow would resemble today. Even if work was stressful, it offered protection from chaos. That protection has weakened. Benefits are increasingly tied to performance metrics, contract renewals, or company discretion. Health insurance can vanish with a job. Paid leave disappears during restructuring. Retirement plans feel distant or unreliable. The promise quietly changed from security through work to survival through work. That shift forces people to stay alert at all times. You don't relax when things are going well. You prepare for when they stop. One of the most common feelings workers describe today isn't anger, it's confusion. People work harder than previous generations. They upskill. They stay connected. They adapt to new technologies. They accept flexibility and constant change. Yet many feel like they're standing still. Raises don't keep up with costs. Promotions don't change outcomes. Switching jobs resets risk rather than improving stability. The system still rewards effort, just not with safety. And when effort stops, delivering protection, motivation changes. People don't stop working, they stop believing. Careers once had shape. You entered at one level, you grew, You moved upward. Even if progress was slow, it was visible. Today, career paths are fragmented, companies flatten hierarchies, middle management disappears, internal mobility shrinks. Roles are designed around projects rather than progression. Workers move sideways instead of upward. Experience accumulates, but direction doesn't. This creates a workforce that is skilled but unsettled. People become highly capable and deeply uncertain. In this environment, loyalty no longer makes sense. Why commit to a company that may not commit to you? Why invest emotionally in a role that can disappear overnight? Workers respond rationally. They keep resumes updated. They maintain side income. They stay alert for exits. This isn't selfishness, it's adaptation. But when everyone operates defensively, trust evaporates. And without trust, long-term growth becomes impossible. The most damaging part of this job market isn't financial, it's psychological. Constant uncertainty creates chronic stress. People never feel settled. Even during good months, they wait for the next disruption. This erodes confidence. People delay life decisions. They avoid commitments. They hesitate to take risks that once felt reasonable. The future feels conditional. And when enough people feel that way, the economy slows. Not because jobs disappear, but because confidence does. Many people assume this is just another cycle, that things will stabilize, that job security will return when conditions improve. But this shift isn't driven by recession alone. It's driven by incentives. Companies are rewarded for flexibility, not stability, for cost control, not loyalty, for efficiency, not durability. As long as those incentives remain, insecurity will remain too. The system isn't broken, it's optimized, just not for workers. This quiet transformation explains why so many people feel disconnected from work even when employed. It explains why job numbers don't match lived experience. And it explains why trust in the job market has eroded without a visible collapse. But this is only the first layer, because when insecurity becomes normal at work, it doesn't stay there. It spreads into behavior, identity, and society itself. When instability lasts long enough, people stop reacting to it. They adapt. This is the most overlooked phase of a collapsing job market. Not the layoffs, not the hiring freezes, but the quiet normalization of insecurity. The moment when workers stop expecting stability and start building their lives around uncertainty. At first, this adaptation feels responsible. People save more. They spend less. They avoid unnecessary risks. They call it being realistic. But over time, this realism reshapes behavior in ways that are difficult to reverse. One of the first things insecurity erases is long-term thinking. 5-year plans feel optimistic. 10-year plans feel unrealistic. People stop asking, where do I want to be? And start asking, how do I stay where I am? Careers become short-term strategies instead of long-term paths. Workers focus on maintaining employability rather than building mastery. Skills are chosen for safety, not growth. Decisions are made to avoid loss rather than pursue opportunity. The future shrinks into a series of checkpoints. Make it through this quarter. Survive this restructuring. Get past this performance review. This mindset keeps people moving, but not forward. In earlier generations, work was closely tied to identity. People described themselves by what they did. Careers offered meaning, status, and a sense of contribution. Even difficult jobs carried pride because they promised stability and progress. That connection is weakening. Today, many workers avoid identifying too closely with their jobs. They've learned that roles are temporary, titles are fragile, and loyalty is rarely rewarded. So they detach. They perform their tasks. They meet expectations. They comply with change. but emotionally, they stay distant. Work becomes a transaction rather than a relationship. Time and effort are exchanged for income, nothing more. Pride fades. Engagement drops. Motivation becomes mechanical. This isn't laziness, it's self-protection. As insecurity spreads, career behavior becomes defensive. People keep resumes updated at all times. They maintain side income streams. They quietly network even when happy at work. Job hopping increases. Not because workers are ambitious, but because staying put feels dangerous. Loyalty is replaced by optionality. This creates a paradox. Workers appear flexible, mobile, and adaptable, but underneath, they feel stuck. Each move resets risk. Benefits restart. Trust must be rebuilt. Stability remains out of reach. Careers become fragmented. Experience accumulates, but coherence disappears. Many employers struggle to understand why motivation has declined. They offer perks, they promote culture, they emphasize purpose, but none of it addresses the core problem. People don't lack motivation, they lack safety. When effort doesn't lead to protection, motivation becomes fragile. Why invest extra energy in a system that may discard you without warning? Why innovate when failure carries disproportionate consequences? People still work hard. They just stop going beyond what is required. This quiet withdrawal is not visible in metrics, but it is everywhere in lived experience. Living in a permanently unstable job market carries a psychological cost. Workers remain alert even during good times. They don't relax after promotions. They don't trust positive feedback. They don't believe good performance guarantees continuity. This constant vigilance creates exhaustion. People feel tired not because they work too much, but because they never feel safe enough to rest mentally. Stress becomes chronic. Burnout spreads quietly. Confidence erodes. And once confidence is damaged, recovery becomes slow and uncertain. Work is only the beginning. When job insecurity becomes normal, it spills into other areas of life. People delay marriage. They postpone having children. They avoid major purchases, not because they don't want these things, but because commitment feels risky. Life decisions are filtered through employment uncertainty. Everything becomes conditional. If this job lasts, if this contract renews, if nothing unexpected happens. This conditional living creates a society that looks functional but feels paused. One of the most dangerous side effects of this job market is the illusion of control. People are told that if they stay flexible, keep learning, and remain adaptable, they'll be fine. Responsibility is pushed downward. Risk is framed as personal, but no amount of individual effort can compensate for structural insecurity. Workers can optimize everything: skills, savings, networks, and still be vulnerable to decisions entirely outside their control. When systems shift risk downward, individuals internalize failure even when it isn't theirs. This creates shame instead of anger. And shame is quiet. Some believe this adaptation is temporary, that once conditions improve, confidence will return. But adaptation leaves scars. Once people learn to expect instability, they carry that expectation forward. Even if the job market strengthens, trust doesn't instantly rebound. Workers remain cautious. They hesitate to commit. They avoid exposure. Recovery becomes slower because belief lags behind data. The job market may improve on paper, but behavior remains defensive. Perhaps the most troubling outcome of this phase is what institutions learn. When workers adapt without open resistance, systems interpret silence as success. Insecurity appears manageable. Flexibility seems effective. The absence of revolt is mistaken for resilience. So the system continues. Incentives remain unchanged. Instability remains built in. Risk remains concentrated at the bottom. This is how quiet collapse differs from crisis. Crisis forces response. Adaptation allows continuation. By this stage, the job market hasn't just changed how people work. It has changed how people think about effort, about loyalty, about the future. Work becomes something to endure rather than build upon. Life becomes something to manage rather than expand. And once a society reaches this point, the consequences extend far beyond employment. They reshape culture, trust, and the possibility of progress itself. When a job market reaches this stage, the damage is no longer limited to paychecks or careers. It becomes cultural. People still work. They still apply. They still show up every day. But something essential breaks beneath the surface. The belief that work is a reliable path towards stability, dignity, and progress. Once that belief fades, a society can continue functioning, but it stops moving forward. This is the final phase of a quiet collapse, when insecurity becomes so normal that it no longer shocks anyone. The American job market was once built on an implicit promise. If you worked consistently, improved your skills, and stayed engaged, your life would gradually become more secure. Maybe not wealthy, but stable, predictable, worth building around. That promise shaped behavior for generations. People committed to careers. They invested in communities. They planned futures around work. Today, that promise feels unreliable. Work no longer represents a foundation, it represents exposure. People participate not because they believe in the outcome, but because they have no alternative. Employment becomes endurance, something to survive rather than something to grow through. And endurance, while admirable, is not a vision for the future. This shift hits the middle class hardest. The poorest have long lived with instability. The wealthy are insulated from it. But the middle class was defined by its buffer, enough margin to absorb shocks without collapse. That buffer is gone. A single layoff can now unravel years of careful planning. A health issue can erase savings. A corporate decision made far away can instantly reshape a life built over decades. This creates a new class divide that isn't visible in income statistics. It's the divide between people with margin and people without it. Margin is the new wealth. As insecurity spreads, trust erodes slowly, not in explosions, but in withdrawal. Workers trust employers less because loyalty hasn't protected them. They trust hiring systems less because effort hasn't been rewarded. They trust institutions less because stability feels conditional. Even civic trust weakens. People don't disengage because they don't care. They disengage because caring hasn't delivered protection. Participation begins to feel symbolic rather than meaningful. This erosion doesn't produce outrage. It produces fatigue. A tired society does not revolt. It withdraws. A society living in survival mode cannot take bold risks. Entrepreneurship declines because failure is unforgiving. Creativity narrows because experimentation feels irresponsible. Long-term investment weakens because the future feels uncertain. People protect what little stability they have instead of reaching for more. This is why the cost of a collapsing job market isn't just economic, it's imaginative. When people stop believing that effort leads somewhere better, the collective horizon shrinks. One of the most damaging narratives of this era is the idea that insecurity is a personal failure. Workers are told to re-skill constantly, to stay flexible, to adapt endlessly. Responsibility is pushed downward, while risk is pushed outward. But no amount of personal optimization can replace systemic stability. When people internalize structural failure as personal inadequacy, shame replaces anger. And shame keeps people quiet. This is how a system avoids confrontation while continuing unchanged. Many believe that once the job market improves, confidence will return. But confidence does not rebound automatically. Once people learn to expect instability, they carry that expectation forward. Even during good periods, they remain cautious. They hesitate to commit. They delay decisions. They prepare for loss. Behavior lags behind data. This is why recoveries feel weaker than they used to. Jobs return. Wages rise slightly, but belief does not. The damage is psychological, and psychological damage heals slowly. The quiet collapse of the job market reveals something uncomfortable. The system still works, just not for stability. It produces output. It generates profit. It maintains appearances. But it no longer offers a dependable path for ordinary people to build secure lives around work. That is the real crisis, not unemployment, but disconnection. When enough people stop trusting work, society doesn't fall apart. It hollows out. People still comply. They still participate. They still endure. But optimism fades. Community thins. Futures narrow. Progress becomes maintenance. Ambition becomes risk management. Hope becomes conditional. This is the slowest kind of collapse, the kind that feels normal while it happens. America's job market didn't collapse loudly. It didn't announce itself. It changed in ways that removed security while keeping the appearance of stability. And because that change was gradual, people adapted instead of resisting. The most dangerous outcome isn't job loss. It's the loss of belief that work can still deliver a life worth building. Until that belief is restored, honestly, structurally, and system-wide, no amount of hiring data will fix what has been lost. The job market will continue to function, but the future it promises will keep shrinking.